The linen napkin slipped from my hand and hit the floor wet from the rinse water. I hadn't even dried my hands when the phone lit up with Callista's name. Her voice came through smooth, sugary. "Hi, Ramona. I hope this doesn't come off wrong, but for the aesthetic we're going for, it might be better if you didn't come to the wedding." I stood in my quiet kitchen, the faucet still dripping behind me. My hands were soaked. My heart wasn't. "All right," I said. "That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't raised my voice since, but I did raise something else her past. Where in the world are you listening from right now? Drop your city in the comments, like these real-life confessions. Hit subscribe, I've got more truth bombs coming." Jude was never a boy who liked conflict. Even when he was little, maybe 5, he'd come home from preschool with his backpack half open and his shoes on the wrong feet because another kid had told him that backwards was cooler, and Jude didn't want to argue. He's always chosen peace over friction, which is how Callista slipped in. He met her volunteering at an animal shelter just outside Portland. Said she was funny, smart, real. And for a while, I believed that too. She was polite, always brought lavender-scented wine candles when she came over, complimented my casseroles even when she barely touched them. She called me Mrs. Ellery with a kind of ironic deference that made me feel like I was in on some joke I didn't understand. But slowly, things began shifting. It started small. She didn't like the old family photo in the hallway. "Feels a little heavy, don't you think?" Then it was the dishes I used for Sunday roast. "Do you ever get, tired of all the beige?" I brushed it off. Young people want minimalism. That's fine. But then she began rewriting Jude's stories. Told people she inspired him to go to vet school when he'd already graduated before they met. Told her followers she helped him start his clinic when it was his late father's life insurance that paid for it. She didn't lie. She just rearranged the truth. And Jude, sweet, hopeful Jude, was too in love to notice. He started echoing her phrases: curate the vibe, protect our peace, lean into the soft era. I barely recognized his voice sometimes, but I smiled. I kept smiling, even when she changed the RSVP name from Mother of the Groom to Guest of Jude. Even when she suggested my dress for the engagement party should maybe be navy instead of cream, just so you don't blend with the backdrop. Even when she said it might be special to have just my mom in the bridal suite, for balance. That was the word she used a lot, balance. As if I was a weight, an anchor, not a mother. I tried, I really did. I told myself, it's his wedding, not mine. I folded napkins. I paid deposits. I even let her rearrange the ceremony reading so her favorite lifestyle blogger could do a poem instead of me, all while pretending I didn't notice her slowly, carefully, exquisitely erasing me. But the day she called to tell me not to come at all, that was the day I stopped pretending. I didn't sleep much the night Callista uninvited me. The faucet kept dripping, the fridge hummed louder than usual, and somewhere between midnight and the start of dawn, I found myself on her Instagram. I wasn't trying to snoop. I just wanted to understand. How did a woman I once served tea to with floral saucers decide I didn't belong at my own son's wedding? Her profile was pristine beach shots, soft girl poses, oat milk lattes with captions like, "Healing is not linear." There were plenty of Jude. Her hand on his knee, her head on his shoulder, her smile just wide enough to look candid. But there were none of me, not even one. Not from the engagement brunch I hosted. Not from the Christmas dinner where I set the table for 14. Not even the clinic open house where I wore her brand's lipstick like a fool. It wasn't absence, it was erasure. I scrolled deeper, back before Jude. Before her face was quite so symmetrical, before the filters and cheekbone angles. And then I saw it. The photo was older, grainy, warmer tones. Callista stood in front of a courthouse. Not some glamorous chapel or Pinterest board dream, but a real red-bricked courthouse, with ivy creeping up the side. She wore a short white dress, simple, no veil, and she was holding hands with a man I'd never seen, his arm around her waist. Her face turned slightly to him, laughing. The caption, "Forever started here." The date stamped below, 3 years ago. I stared at the screen until my fingers went numb. The tag on the man was still there, Noah Wynn, but when I tapped it, nothing came up. Account deleted, gone. I clicked back to the photo. Same eyes, same dimples, same Callista, just softer. Not the polished version with brand deals and PR-ready charm. This Callista looked real, which made the version we knew feel like a mask. I wanted to believe it was just a serious ex. But something about the dress, the setting, the caption, "Forever started here," made my stomach tighten. I didn't know who the man was. I didn't know why he disappeared. But I knew one thing. My son wasn't the first man she'd walked toward in white. And I had no idea if he knew that. Not yet. The name stuck with me all morning, Noah Wynn. I wrote it down on a sticky note just to see it in my own handwriting. There was something about the way his arm wrapped around her waist. Natural, familiar, not posed. That wasn't a photo for likes. That was a memory. And memories don't lie, people do. I opened my laptop and typed in Noah Wynn marriage records, Maine, then Massachusetts, then Vermont. Nothing. I widened the search. Finally, buried on a registry site from 3 years ago, I found it. Ava Marie Wynn, Noah Elias Wynn, married June 12, 2020. That was her name before she became Callista. My heart knocked hard against my ribs. There were no divorce filings attached, no public notice, nothing. I leaned back, stared at the screen. This wasn't some messy ex she never mentioned. This was a husband, still legally tied to her. And my son was weeks away from becoming her second without knowing he was never the first. I clicked back through the wedding planner documents, dates, deposits, RSVP lists. All in my name, all for a wedding that wasn't even legal. Then I did something I hadn't done since I was widowed. I made a folder, labeled it Callista Personal. I dropped in the registry screenshot, then saved the courthouse photo, added the Instagram link, cross-referenced her previous addresses based on old tags. One place popped up more than once, Wilmont, Vermont. There was a warehouse in Wilmont. She'd once told me she learned to hustle working nights in a place with bad coffee and colder managers. I searched logistics companies there. A job listing came up, 6 months old, one supervisor's name listed at the bottom. I called. "Hi, I'm looking for someone who might have worked with you, Noah Wynn." The voice on the other end didn't hesitate. "Yeah, I remember him. Not here anymore, though. Do you have an address on file?" I guess. You a family member?" "Old friend," I said, trying to return something he lost. I wrote it down, hand shaking slightly. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but I knew one thing for sure. If she could hide an entire husband, what else was she willing to bury? And how much of her past was my son unknowingly marrying? The wedding might still be on the calendar, but I had just circled something else. The truth. The address led to a weathered duplex at the edge of Wilmont. Paint chipped, blinds broken, no car in the driveway. I sat in my car for a long minute, hands gripping the manila folder on the seat beside me. Inside screenshots, registry record, and that photo, the one that started it all. I didn't know what I was expecting. But when the door finally opened, I knew it was him, Noah Wynn. A little older than in the picture, unshaven, worn. He looked at me like I might be from collections or worse, the past. "I'm not here to hurt you," I said. "But I need 5 minutes. It's about Callista." That stopped him. His jaw tensed. Then he opened the door wider. The inside smelled like instant noodles and unwashed clothes. Mattress on the floor, one chair, a fan buzzing in the corner. I stayed standing. "She's marrying my son," I said. "In 10 days. Noah didn't blink. "She told me he was a business contact," he said, voice flat. "Said she was consulting. And she told him she's never been married." He almost smiled. Of course she did. I handed him the folder. He didn't open it. "You don't need that," he said. "It's true. We got married. June 2020. Never divorced." "She never mentioned you," I said. "She paid me not to," he answered. I blinked. "She what?" 15 grand. She found me in a motel after I got laid off. Said I was holding her back. That she had a brand to build. Gave me the money. Said if I ever showed up again, she'd ruin me. He sat on the mattress, eyes dull. So I vanished. Just like she wanted. I sat down on the chair, slowly. "She erased me," I said. "From my son's wedding?" Said I didn't match the aesthetic. He laughed dry and tired. "She's terrified of the past. Builds a perfect present and runs when the cracks show." I looked at him. Really looked. This man wasn't bitter. He was broken. Not just by poverty, but by a woman who rewrote their story without his consent. And the child I asked, the little girl in that one photo, his eyes softened. "My daughter, ours. She told me she was leaving her with an aunt while she built her vision. Said she'd come back. She never did." I swallowed hard. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out a checkbook. 20,000, I said. "One truth. At the altar, that's all." He stared at the check like it was fire, then nodded once. "If I do this," he said, "we do it my way." I nodded back. And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't tell Jude. I didn't warn the wedding planner. I didn't whisper a word to anyone, not even my sister, who always had a knack for sniffing out secrets. Because once you say it out loud, it becomes real. And I wasn't ready to hear my own voice say the words. "She's already married." The morning after I left Wilmont, I sat in my kitchen again. Same chair, same faucet drip. But I wasn't folding napkins this time. I was folding evidence. I printed 2 copies of everything just in case. The marriage license, the Instagram post, the quote about forever, a zoomed-in shot of the little girl, the check stub marked paid in full. I slipped them into 2 identical folders, one for me, one for Noah. Then I ironed my navy dress, the one I planned to wear when I was still invited. Simple tailored long sleeves. I zipped it up slowly, studying my reflection. I didn't look like a mother of the groom. I looked like a witness. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about me. It was about Jude, my son who still believed in promises, who still thought love meant truth. He deserved to know who he was about to marry. And she deserved to be seen. Fully, unedited, no filter, no escape. So when I tucked the folder into my purse and grabbed my keys, I wasn't nervous. I was calm, because peace doesn't always look like silence. Sometimes it looks like evidence on ivory paper. And I was done being erased. I arrived at Rosehaven Country Club at exactly 9:05 a.m. The parking lot was already filling with rented SUVs. Women in pastels teetering on heels, and vendors unloading crates of floral arrangements I had paid for. I didn't flinch. I'd paid to be here twice over, once with my wallet, once with my silence. And today I was cashing both in. Noah was already waiting. He wore a white button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, and dress shoes that looked like they'd seen more sidewalks than ballrooms. He didn't smile, didn't ask if I was sure, just held the manila folder a little tighter when he saw me. I brought backup, I said, lifting my purse. We walk in, we don't speak unless asked. We don't start a scene, we end one. He nodded. We entered through the side patio doors. No one stopped us. That's the thing about high-end weddings, people assume you belong if you look like you do. Inside, the music was soft jazz, the scent of imported peonies filled the room, and the waiters moved like choreography. I recognized the quartet. I'd written their deposit check. I recognized the chairs, the plates, the custom-printed menu cards with the Ellery Wynn Union in calligraphy I'd paid extra for. I also recognized the way people looked through me, as if I were staff, or worse, irrelevant. Then I saw her, Callista, laughing with her bridesmaids, air-kissing an influencer who'd flown in from LA. She was radiant, hair curled to perfection, dress sleek, minimalist, custom-tailored. She looked like a Vogue editorial. But her eyes were scanning the room. She knew. Somewhere in her gut, the past was walking through those doors. When she saw me, her entire face froze. Then she saw him. Noah. I watched her chest rise sharply. Her hand dropped the champagne flute she'd been holding. Glass shattered. Someone gasped. She turned and walked fast toward the back hall, motioning to her maid of honor. Noah didn't move. Neither did I. We weren't here to chase her. We were here to stand in plain sight and let her unravel. The ceremony was set for noon. For the next 2 hours, we sat quietly in the back row, ignored, invisible, but never more present. I watched as Jude walked in, adjusting his cufflinks, smiling nervously at guests. He looked young, too young to be standing in front of a truth like this. The music shifted. Guests took their seats. A hush fell as the officiant stepped up to the small arch wrapped in orchids flown in from Ecuador. The exact moment Callista entered, I felt it. The shift, the pressure. She was composed again, smiling, gliding, but her eyes never once glanced toward the back. Not even for a second. She thought if she didn't look at us, we wouldn't exist. And then came the words, "If anyone here has reason why these two should not be joined in marriage." My heels clicked against the hardwood as I stood. So did Noah. Gasps. A whisper. "Who is that?" I walked slowly down the aisle. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vindictive. I was deliberate. I stopped 3 feet from Jude. He blinked. "Mom." I held out the folder. "Jude," I said softly, "you need to see this." He didn't move at first. Didn't take it. Didn't speak. His hands were stiff at his sides, fingers twitching just like when he was a child trying not to cry. Callista's voice came sharp from the altar. "What is this, Ramona? What are you doing?" I didn't answer her. I looked only at my son. Eventually, he took the folder, opened the first page. "Read." And then his face. His face cracked. Jude flipped to the second page. Then the third. Each sheet a brick cracking the foundation under his feet. Callista stepped forward, voice trembling now, aimed like a dart. "This is insane," she said. "He's lying. He's been obsessed with me for years." Her mascara hadn't smudged yet, but her voice had. "This is a setup. You hate me, Ramona. You've always hated me. You couldn't stand that he chose me over you." I still didn't look at her. I looked only at Jude. His jaw was clenched. The folder was open in his hands, the page showing Callista laughing in white standing next to Noah in front of a courthouse. Then Noah spoke, not loud, but clear. "That's my wife," he said. "She never filed for divorce." Gasps rippled through the guests like cold wind. Someone in the third row whispered, "She's already married." Noah stepped beside me. "She paid me to disappear, said I was ruining her future, that she had a plan, a brand, a fiancé, and that our daughter would be better off without my energy around." Callista turned white, literally, not just her dress but her face, her hands. Frozen. "You're lying," she snapped. "We were never really—" "She's 5 now," Noah said louder. Our daughter, you remember her name? Callista's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Someone in the back stood up. The officiant looked lost. The quartet had stopped playing. Jude said nothing. He just kept staring at the photo of a girl, same curls as Callista, same dimple as Noah. She told me Noah added that the girl in this picture was her cousin's daughter. She said she was babysitting. He pointed to the printed image, then looked at Jude. She's your fiancé's child. Silence, like air had been vacuumed out of the room. Then Jude finally spoke. His voice wasn't angry. It was cold, measured. You lied, he said to Callista. About everything. She moved toward him, hand outstretched. I did it for us, Jude. For our future. That marriage, it meant nothing. I was young. I was still married, he cut in. I was protecting you, she pleaded. From the mess from baggage that wasn't yours. That's my child you erased, Noah snapped. Callista turned to him. You don't know what it was like. I had nothing, no money, no prospects. You had me, he said. You just didn't want to be seen with someone who didn't match your curated feed. Jude's eyes glistened. Then he closed the folder. Looked at the officiant. We're done here. The officiant blinked. Sorry, this wedding is over. Then he turned to me. Softly, steadily. Let's go. I didn't cry. Didn't cheer. Didn't gloat. I just followed my son out, Noah behind us, past stunned guests and stunned silence. Every heel click felt like thunder. Every step away from the altar felt like reclaiming oxygen. At the door I turned once. Callista still stood frozen in her designer gown. Perfect makeup, perfect hair, perfect lie shattered in front of everyone. Jude didn't look back. Not once. And I knew then, he finally saw her. All of her. And just as importantly, he saw me too. We didn't speak on the way back. Jude sat in the passenger seat, shoulders stiff, staring straight ahead, like he was bracing for another wave that never came. Noah rode in the back silent, holding the folder against his chest like it was a shield. I didn't ask if Jude was okay. He wasn't. I didn't ask if he believed everything. He had seen it. Sometimes the truth doesn't need repeating. When we dropped Noah off, he handed the folder back to me and said just one thing. She'll try to spin this. I nodded. Let her. He gave me a look, tired, grateful, final, then walked into his building and never looked back. At home, I placed the folder in the back of my closet, not to forget, but because its job was done. Then I made another folder. This one digital, with every invoice I had paid under Ramona Ellery for the Ellery Wynn wedding, caterer, cello quartet, photographer, venue, custom floral ice cubes, signature cocktail bar, monogrammed cloth napkins. Every single one was booked under my name. Every single one had a cancellation clause. It took a full day of phone calls, but by sunset, I had clawed back nearly $38,000. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to make sure Callista didn't get a single glass of champagne past her lies. I even canceled the spa day she had scheduled for the morning after the wedding on my dime. The woman at the front desk sounded confused. I wasn't. She's not the bride anymore, I said. And hung up. I didn't post anything. Didn't call Callista's parents. Didn't blast her on social media. I didn't need to. The silence was doing just fine on its own. Jude didn't come by for 3 weeks. No text. No calls. No mom. And I let him have that space. Because silence doesn't always mean distance. Sometimes it just means processing. On a Sunday morning, I came home from the market and found a brown paper bag on my porch. Inside was a container of my favorite soup, chicken lemon rice from a deli across town. No note, just the soup. I smiled. 1 week later, a text. Do you still have my old toolbox? I did. Left it on the porch. He came by after dark, didn't knock, just picked it up and left. 2 weeks later, another message. How do you get red wine out of linen? We stayed on the phone for 8 minutes. Didn't talk about her. Didn't talk about what happened. We talked about grout. About the cat that always sat on the corner fence. About the weird client who wanted a guinea pig tooth cleaning. And slowly, one breadcrumb at a time, he returned. Not as a broken man, but as my son. One Sunday, he brought someone with him. Her name was Melina. No makeup. Hair in a braid. She brought flowers, not roses, not orchids, daisies. She complimented my chipped teacups, helped set the table, asked about the photo of Jude in 3rd grade with chocolate on his nose. She didn't try to shine. She just was. And that was enough. They dated quietly, privately. No big announcements, no curated updates. Just Sunday coffee, dinner on mismatched plates. A year later, they got married. Not in a ballroom, not under a chandelier, but in my backyard. Jude built the arch with his own hands. Lena walked barefoot across the grass in a white sundress she bought secondhand. The guests were family neighbors, a few close friends. The music was a playlist from Jude's phone, the cake was crooked, and the lights were borrowed from my porch. And when Jude turned to me before the vows and asked, "Will you walk me down the aisle?" I had to sit for a moment, because something inside me, something silent and waiting, finally exhaled. This time there were no lies, no edits, no exclusions, only truth and love, and the kind of peace that isn't curated for cameras, but grown, earned. Lena hugged me after the ceremony and whispered, "Thank you for raising him right. I'll never take that for granted." No spotlight, no hashtags, just a quiet, warm evening under string lights and second chances. Later that night, when the cake had been eaten and the lights dimmed, I sat on the back steps with my shoes off and my heart open. I didn't cry. I didn't replay the chaos. I just let it be done, not because I forgot what Callista did, but because I no longer needed to hold it. The truth had its moment, and it didn't scream. It stood. And it stayed. And that was enough. I never heard from Callista again. Not a voicemail, not an email, not even an attempt to reclaim her version of the story, which told me more than words ever could. She had built her world like a glass house, pristine, polished, and hollow. And when one brick of truth hit it, it shattered. But this story isn't about her anymore. It's about what came after. Jude didn't just rebuild. He rerouted. He stopped apologizing for his boundaries. He started asking better questions. Not just to others, but to himself. He let himself grieve what almost was and embrace what is. As for me, I don't fold napkins anymore for people who erase me. I don't keep quiet to keep the peace. I don't curate my role in other people's stories. I write my own. There's a photo on my fridge now, not of a wedding cake or flower wall, just Jude, Lena, and me in the backyard, sunlight in our hair, bare feet on the grass, a crooked folding chair behind us. We're laughing, not for the camera, but because we're home. Because truth, when spoken without screaming, becomes a foundation no storm can shake. And because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying the illusion, it's outliving it. What would you have done if you were me? Would you have stayed quiet or brought the truth to the altar? Drop your vote below. Share your story if you've ever been erased by someone who smiled while doing it. And if you believe in real justice, subscribe. There's more to come.